On today's episode, I chat with Julianne of Sweet Babe Clothing and Revelry Handcrafted about both her birth stories, her experience with motherhood so far, and what it's like running two small businesses while being a stay-at-home mom. I'm Natalie, and you're listening to the Resource Doula podcast, a place where we provide information to help you make informed healthcare decisions for yourself and your family. Julianne is a Pacific Northwest native who headed for warmer weather after high school and earned a product development degree at the Fashion Institute in Los Angeles. After graduation, she returned home to Washington State where she met her husband. Julianne is now a stay-at-home mama to two girls and entrepreneur of two small businesses. She designs and creates baby and kids clothing as well as party and holiday decor. She loves baking and can find an excuse to bring a homemade cake almost anywhere. Julianne and I go way back because, well, we're cousins. I'm sure you're going to love this episode, so let's get started. Hey, Julianne, welcome to the show.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for our chat today. I was hoping that you could just start out by talking a little bit about yourself, introducing yourself to the audience.
Okay. Yeah, well, you just kind of gave the basics, the details about me. I think that's actually a funny question to ask someone, especially a mom. It's like, I'm always struggling with identity, like, who am I now? And, like, what purpose do I have? And I feel like a lot of times as moms, we have this like way that we move through how we identify ourselves, and especially moms online. Hi, I'm Julianne. I'm a wife. I'm a mom of two, and I'm XYZ. Like, we never start with who we are. It's always like, I'm a wife and I'm a mom. And like, I'm guilty of this. Like, I just did a post, reintroducing myself to my account, and I was like, oh, why did I do that? And or it's also just like, I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or like, I am a stay-at-home mom, and then like, that's it. And there's never really like any other context to it. And I don't think I ever told you this, but I have an interesting story that kind of like sums that up. So as Natalie mentioned, we are cousins. So our moms are sisters. And this last fall, we had a family gathering, and Natalie and I were kind of chatting next to one of our aunts. And she was like, oh, Julianne, like, what are you doing? Are you working? And I was kind of like chasing after a kid or something. So I didn't really respond, but Natalie was like, oh, she has Etsy shops. She's a business owner. And like, you were totally hyping me up. And I think a lot of times it's like, I'm a very awkward person, and I'm very hesitant to talk about myself and what I do. And it was just like very impactful to hear you speak about me like that. And I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, I am.
You are. Oh, that's awesome. You never told me that. Thank you for sharing now.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you talked about becoming a mom and kind of wrestling with that identity a little bit and figuring that all out. Can you start with your first birth experience, kind of what led up to that, who you were as a person, how that experience kind of shaped the beginning of motherhood for you?
Yes, I have always been so excited to be a mom. My friends growing up always joked that I was the mom of the group, always had, the snacks and the hand sanitizer in my bag. Like, I was destined. I was ready. So ready that I stopped birth control on my honeymoon. I was like, my husband and I, we were together for, I can't even do the math now. A couple of years. Like, we had already lived together, and we were like, yeah, okay, let's do this. Let's have a kid. I absolutely knew like nothing except for the very basics of how you conceive a child. It was like I had to take a crash course in, female physiology and like everything that went into that. I had no idea about my menstrual cycle, or, when I could conceive and was fertile, and there was all these new words, and I really didn't understand it. Except the basics of what you're taught in health class in school. So I think like that was a huge part of it too. I've always considered myself to be somewhat of a health conscious person, but I was like, whoa, okay, here we go. Let's start from zero. It ended up taking about 5 months to conceive, which is absolutely normal. But of course, as a first time parent can be confusing and emotional and stressful. And I realized I really like to plan things and know when they're happening. So that was kind of a lot. I decided during that 5 months that I was going to take my yoga teacher certification training, which was a 200-hour class while I was working full time. And so my husband and I were like, okay, let's stop trying to conceive, we'll let it happen. Let's get through this. And then, we'll start trying again. Well, so then I got pregnant like right away. Everyone always jokes about just relax and don't try and it'll happen. And I know that can be really like stressful and hurtful for some people during their fertility journey. But I was like, okay, yep, that was it. It worked.
It worked.
Maybe it was the hot yoga. I don't know. Something. We found out I was pregnant when we were in Mexico. I ended up having really bad sickness. I got rotavirus and E. coli. So I was like painfully sick, thought it was morning sickness, ended up going to the ER. So it was not that romantic journey of like, I'm going to take a test and like, hide it somewhere in the house or like give him a onesie. It was like we got home from the airport, I took a test and I was like, well, yep, we're pregnant. And I remember my husband looking over. I was like down the hall in the bathroom and I was like, yep. And he looked at me from the living room and he was like, can we process this tomorrow? Because it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, yes. So then, of course, the next day, once I was starting to feel better, we were excited. And then it all began, like, when do you tell your family? How do you tell your family? And all of that. And, what doctor are you going to choose? And that's a whole other topic of like, how do you choose a doctor? And, you don't know what you don't know. And it was a lot.
It's a lot of decisions to make in that state of like, oh my gosh, okay, it's finally here. We finally achieved the thing that we've been trying for a long time. So yeah, lots and lots of decisions, and everybody has their own opinions too on what you should be doing or should not be doing, right? Did you have a lot of that with your first pregnancy? Do you feel like?
I feel like everyone was pretty respectful. We also were the first. So I'm one of 3 siblings and my husband is one of 3 siblings. And we were the first to have a kid on both sides of our family. So first grandkid for both of our parents. So I don't think anyone really knew. And, of course, for our parents, it had been, 30 years, give or take, since they had been, our moms had been pregnant. And it's a whole different world now. I think the biggest thing is that, people are going back, well, back when you were kids, we did this and we did that. And again, luckily, our parents are very respectful of the decisions that we make. So there was never really any like big things about that. But it's like, well, yeah, we were fine, but now we do it differently. Just kind of talking through that with people. And then, of course, the timing of this pregnancy. So our first daughter was born in November of 2019. So when COVID happened, she was only 3 months old. And I feel like that really added a whole other layer of it. So, when she was 4 months to almost, 8 months old was all of lockdown in that summer. And just, of course, she's a young baby. We're not sure, like, is it okay to have her around people? And then I had a niece who was born in April of 2020 out of state. So, not getting to meet her and just kind of, how that fits into our whole family. And it was just a lot. And so not only, like you said, trying to navigate these health choices of when you're choosing a provider, but then it's like, as a parent, you're making health choices for your kids, but then now you're also kind of making or helping other people make health choices for themselves. So it's just like this constant, okay, is it worth seeing this person, exposure and it's been almost 3 years since we've been dealing with all this. So we all know what it's like, but I feel like it was just like layer upon layer upon layer.
Yeah. And that's a lot of mental load in and of itself, but then processing it after. I know I'm jumping ahead to your second
Okay.
daughter, but
Yeah.
what differences do you notice with the lockdown baby
Hmm.
becoming a parent versus a normal, quote unquote, normal, social world with a second baby?
Van, they are just so different. And I know everyone says that and it gets annoying, like, oh, each kid is unique. But it's like, it really is true. It's like pretty much any stereotype that you think parents say, like, sleep while you can, or, all of that annoying
Yeah.
stuff, like, especially as someone who's, about to become a parent, you're like, I know, I know. Yes, that's annoying, but it is mostly true. That's why people say it. But they are so different.
Mm,
I mean, the biggest difference is their delivery. Our first, I had an unplanned cesarean birth, and then our second, I had a vaginal birth after cesarean, which was my dream. I wanted to be able to do it. So, I mean, that itself was, a huge thing for me to be able to accomplish. But our first daughter was 90th percentile. Our second was 20th. So it's just like everything about them is different. I feel like I'm a new parent again. And it's funny
mm,
because they're only 2 years apart, which
yeah.
isn't that much. And I'm like, I already forgot. I was like, wait, how do you do this? What do you do? What temperature are you supposed to call their doctor? And it's like all of these tiny things that it's like, man, I feel like a new parent again. And then, of
Mm.
course, with your first kid, you didn't also have a toddler. So you're learning how to parent with a toddler and then how to parent a toddler with a baby.
It's a lot of new experiences for sure. Man, do you want to go more into detail about each of their birth stories and kind of how that transpired?
I'd love to, yeah.
Okay.
So, like I said, with our first, she was born in 2019. I had a wonderful pregnancy. I had an office job at the time, and then I was instructing yoga for a little bit in the summertime, but got a little hot. So I stopped doing that. Um, Her pregnancy was honestly, it was perfect. There was no issues. Like I felt pretty good, sick in the beginning and it got better and I got big. I was rather round. She ended up being almost 10 pounds. And so like looking back, I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Um, she was full term. And a couple days before her due date, we ended up having to put our dog down. And she
Mm.
was my husband's dog from college. So like, I always joke, he loved her before he loved me. Like she was his ride or die.
Aw.
And that was like one of the most emotional things I've ever had to gone through. I didn't have pets growing up like that. So I'd never experienced it. And it was a lot being 39 weeks and like 4 days pregnant
Yeah.
and then having to deal with that. And it was hard for a couple days. And then I like a switch flipped in my mind. I was like, I am not going to be able to deliver this baby if I don't get myself in check.
Hmm.
I had read Ina May. What's her book called? The Guide to Childbirth or something?
Yes.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So I had read that towards the end of my pregnancy. And I was like, yep, she talked about something like this. If your head's not right, that baby's not coming out. So that was kind of like the first like hard thing, I guess you could say, like for that pregnancy, is I was like, all right, here's my challenge, getting over this hurdle. I'm ready to have this baby.
Wow.
And so I was like bouncing on my ball, going on walks, eating spicy food. I did all the things, castor oil. Do not do that. I personally do not recommend that. That was not fun. So then we ended up on I can't remember if it was, the day before my due date, I had my 40-week checkup. And so my doctor did a membrane sweep to get things going and it worked. We went home and that night my water partially broke.
Okay.
We got to the hospital. Things were progressing pretty well. And then all of a sudden they were going fast. And so we were like, and this was at night. I think we got to the hospital again. It's like everything just like you forget.
Hmm.
It was like evening, probably 6 o'clock or 7. We got to the hospital.
Okay.
And so like my husband's like calling our parents, calling my sister. She lived over an hour away. And I'm like, all right, come down to the hospital. And everyone's in the waiting room. So again, this is pre-COVID. People could be in the waiting
Oh
room.
man. Talk
And
about pressure.
yeah. And I was like, I'm not getting an epidural, like natural, everything. I printed out my birth plan, brought it with me. I was ready to have this baby. I had my birth ball in the car. Or actually, I think we made someone drive home to my house and get it because the one at the hospital was not cutting it. I was like, this is not the right size. I need my ball.
I need my own.
I need mine. And I realized that I really liked being like active and up and moving, or like at least like on hands and knees during contractions and stuff. And I was really, really hesitant to get an epidural. I think it was like my mom had 3, non-medicated births. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'm not natural. I'm a yogi. I'm going to have a natural birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not fun. Like it really is a pain that you cannot explain. And I feel like it, like I said, it happened fast. And I was like, oh my gosh. And there was also again, a couple other things. Like I think either my blood pressure or heart rate or hers was high, and I wanted to be in the bathtub, but I couldn't. And then I was getting sick. I was like throwing up and stuff. So we were like, all right, give me the drugs. Let's have this baby.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, we're going to start pushing soon. So rush the family in, pushing and more and more. And then flipping my back, my side, hands and knees, everything for almost 7 hours. It was a lot of pushing. And like thinking back to it now, I'm like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
And then my poor husband, who's like holding my epidural leg, like, it's dead weight. Like it was just as like, physical for him too. And I know some people might laugh at that, but like, that's a lot. And like, this is my birth partner. This is the person that's going to help me care for this baby that I have no idea what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And he's exhausted too now. And I loved my nurses. It wasn't my doctor I had seen for the whole pregnancy, but it was a really good team. I was there for so long. They had a shift change and I got another doctor. And at that 7-hour mark, they were like, all right, well, this baby's not coming out. She had at some point flipped before I started pushing sunny side up. And I guess I have like a tilted pelvis or something. So it was just like, the angles, the math, it wasn't going to happen. So they were like, hey, let's try a vacuum extraction. And we were like, what? What is that? And they're like, kind of talked about it. I feel like this was like a 1-minute conversation. And we're like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do that. Well, she ended up getting a hematoma on her head. So that failed. So they're like, okay, now you're going to have a C-section. And I just remembered like feeling so defeated. Also because I knew I was like, okay, I'm essentially having to recover from both types of births at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't have any like tearing or anything like that, but I was like, everything up to the point of the baby coming out, I did for a vaginal birth. And now I have to have a cesarean. So it was definitely like a big like ego check for me. I remember right before they wheeled me back, my whole family came into the waiting room and my brother was there who had surprised me and flew up from Texas. And I just remember like breaking down. It was just like, okay, we're going to do this. Like everyone is here. Like, yeah, I got this. I can do this. So yeah, C-section was a very interesting experience. I'm not going to go into all the details. I think my husband was scarred from it. But she came out and she was large and they said she had the biggest poop they had ever seen. Like, so she probably was actually 10 pounds.
Right. She probably weighed.
Yeah. But then they realized that she had the hematoma on her head. So she had to be rushed up to the NICU. And I think that was the hardest part for me is I didn't get to see my baby right away. I was like, no, she's supposed to come out. She's supposed to come on my chest. And we're supposed to have this moment, Yeah. And then they're also like, all right, Dad, are you staying with Mom or are you going with the baby? And he was like, what? And I was like, go with the baby. It was like super dramatic in my mind, remembering it. So,
shouting across the room.
Yeah. I was like, do it. But again, like the team that we had was really awesome. So I felt good staying there. So yeah, I had to wait for my well, okay. One more detail about this. I could talk about this forever, I guess. I had my epidural for so long. They weren't going to give me more. So they had to give me a spinal block. Well, a student did it and messed it up. And so they started like cutting into me and I was like, hold the phone. I can feel that. And they're like, oh, whoops, it only numbed half your body. And I was like, wait, what?
Wow.
Yeah. So they had to do it again. Yeah, they had to do it again. It was bad.
I don't think you told me that detail before. So,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So I had to wait for that to wear off, and it took like 5 hours. They're like, yeah, it has to wear off so you can stand up so that you can sit in a wheelchair. And I was like, carry me to my baby now.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was just not fun. But she was amazing, and it was cool, and it was weird, like going to meet my baby, but
Yeah.
it was cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was in the NICU for a couple days. And that's another thing. It was like, we had an almost 10-pound baby in the NICU. And so then again, it's almost like I didn't even feel like a NICU parent. I was like, no, there's these like tiny, super premature babies who are like struggling, fighting. And then I got this like big old chunk right here, And of
Yeah.
course, like we were scared, like we were nervous, like we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but we felt like, she was healthy, and, time would help her heal. But yeah, it was just another like, oh, here's my second challenge as a mom of like not feeling enough. So there's
I
that.
feel like you had like a lot of challenges leading up to that point, not just two in
Yeah,
general.
that's true.
But yeah, holy cow. Every time you tell me this story, like we've talked about it, the 7 hours of pushing is what stands out to me most.
Hmm.
Like it on one hand, I'm like, it's great that the doctors and the nurses were like, you can do this. Like, let's
Hmm.
let her do as, give her the effort and give her the time to attempt. Um, but also 7 hours of pushing is so much work and so
Hmm.
exhausting. And like you said, you went through pretty much everything that in until you push a baby out for vaginal
Yeah.
birth.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think about your pelvic floor, like seven
Yes.
hours of pushing against your pelvic floor and the nerve damage that could occur and just the effort in general. Like
Hmm.
it's wild to me that they did that and they
Yes.
encouraged that. I don't like
Yeah.
to say they let you do it because you get
Yeah.
whatever the heck you want and like you're in charge of your birth, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, just like a little bit mind blowing. That's not
Hmm.
as common in
Hmm.
most birth stories that I've heard.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've told you about this is, so I had the same doctor start both deliveries. Um, and so when I went back for our second, we were kind of talking about that. And you always wonder, I'm like, how much do, medical professionals remember about, they see so many people, but we were talking about that and they're like, oh man, I can't believe we let you push for that long. Like, just like casually. And I was like, what? What do you mean? You can't believe that. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, that's it's quite the story from the beginning to the
Hmm.
end. Like from the beginning of the dog and processing all of those emotions of her passing away, right? And then going
Hmm.
through this whole new experience of giving birth to a baby and then also having the NICU. Um, and you were breastfeeding, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
How was that experience in the NICU with establishing breastfeeding?
It was good. I mean, again, really great team of people there. I can't even remember like how soon after we started trying. It took a while for my milk to come in. So I was also pumping, like I was pumping in my recovery room, and then we would bring like the tiniest amount over into the NICU, and the nurses were like, we'll bottle feed her. And they loved snuggling with her because she was so big.
Oh, yeah.
But they were like, yeah, pump. You're still gonna have to wake up and pump, but like send us a bottle, and you at least don't have to come down the hall for once a night. I was like, okay. And we did like the supplemental syringe feeding, and that really worked well. So that like kind of like helped encourage her to latch. She ended up having a tongue tie, which was very challenging for the first couple of weeks, but once we got
Yeah.
that resolved, it was great.
Awesome. Did you do any therapy with the tongue tie, like the stretches and the exercises for her mouth after? Or
Nope.
okay,
Nope.
okay.
I didn't. Nope. That wasn't really on my radar. We got it clipped, and that was it.
I'm glad that was successful and
Yeah.
good. And yeah, yeah. I'm just
Mhm.
curious now that you know there's a
Yeah.
lot of talk about
Yeah.
tongue ties in general. But
Hmm.
um, okay, so tell me about kind of how you processed that whole birth story and what went on in your mind, like in the following months, like the first few months postpartum.
That's a great question. I
Mm,
think. Hmm. I think it's like always in the back of my mind of like all those challenges that I went through, and like those like feelings of not doing it the way I wanted, and or not, just like having it not be how I thought it would go, and then just not feeling like full mom. It's like I didn't deliver her vaginally, and like I didn't see her right away, and like that always being in the back of my mind. But I feel like I've moved on from that now.
Good. Good.
I do remember I had a friend reach out to me. It was a while, like, I mean, almost a year probably. And she had said something along the lines of like, hey, like, do you want to talk about your birth? I feel like you never have. And I've never been like, I'm always open to talking about it. Obviously, I'm like sharing it here.
Yeah.
But I was like, because she was like, it seems like it was a lot. And I just thought maybe you weren't open to sharing about it. And I was like, oh, maybe. So like, I think maybe for a while I did kind of like, close myself off about it just because it is a lot. And I feel like then it turns into, it's like a 30-minute story of everything that led up to it. Cause each piece is connected to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in those immediate postpartum months, your hormones and your sleep deprivation, like all of that leads
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of overwhelm with processing the birth
Mm-hmm.
story, right? Especially if it didn't go how you wanted it to or
Yeah.
imagined it to go. So, okay, now fast forward to
Mm-hmm.
getting pregnant a second time
Yeah.
and talk a little bit about that. And then kind of you can go right into the birth story if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. So our second daughter was born last January. It's funny. I always like hesitate because her due date was February 1st. So for the longest time, it was like in my head that she would be February, but she was born January 27th. And so I'm
Okay.
like, wait, no, it's January, which like sounds bad. I'm like, how could a mom forget her kid's birthday?
That's all
Last
right.
January. So she was conceived in May of 2021. And
Okay.
I think there is a different layer of COVID with that birth or that pregnancy. And it was honestly to the point of like, do we want to have a baby during COVID? Because I'm trying to, at that point, like vaccines had just come out and masks were still, it was still very hot, if you want to
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
I had known a couple people who gave birth and they were required to wear masks during labor. And I was like, I'm not about that,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so it was just a lot to consider. And then even, like I said, with vaccines, it was like they had just come out to the public, general public, when she was conceived.
Hmm.
But we were like, the world's always going to be crazy. Let's raise our family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I maybe thought it was going to take me a little bit longer to get pregnant that time because it took 5 months the first time. So she was conceived the first month once I stopped birth control, which is also funny because I stopped birth control because I forgot to schedule my 1 year annual after giving birth. And my doctor was booked out too far. And I was like, well, I think we're going to have a baby soon and it's going to take a couple months. So we're good.
It's funny how things
Yeah.
happen like that, right?
Yeah. I do feel like, it's like the first time you have a kid, you're very secretive and like you're trying to plan out the perfect time to tell everybody. And we did like a super cute way to tell our family. But I do feel like at least leading up to that, like my mom knew that we were probably going to start thinking about it. Whereas when we had our first kid, she had no idea. She was like, wait, what? You're pregnant? We haven't talked about this, and I was like, sorry, mom.
Surprise.
Surprise. Um, so yeah, that was really fun. Again, like had a pretty good pregnancy, didn't really have any issues. We did get COVID, that fall. So I was probably 6 months pregnant.
Okay.
And that was really scary. And then of course that was
Yeah.
just without getting into things, I chose not to get the vaccination. And, then it's just this like battle in my head of, did I make the right choice
Mm,
and all of this? And then I'm like, what's this mean now that I'm sick?
right.
Um, and, having a respiratory illness when you're pregnant, it's already hard to breathe. So that was kind of scary. And then our
Yeah.
2-year-old, actually, yeah, she had just turned 2. She was sick for like 36 hours. She was, yeah, she was fine.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. So that was helpful. It's like, at least I wasn't,
Yes.
like caring for a sick kid while you're sick is one of the worst things.
Mm-hmm.
But then once that was over, so that was in like October, and then we had the holidays. And then I was like, oh my gosh, once Christmas is over, like we're 1 month away from this baby. And my older sister, her birthday is the middle of January. And I always remember my mom took the Christmas tree down like December 26th, because when she was pregnant with her, she was like, all right, we're done. Let's have this baby, get the house cleaned up. So I could definitely like channel that from my mom of, okay, let's do this. Like, ready for the next, it was like new year, new season, new everything. Let's have this baby.
That
And it
is,
was like mentally a lot to wait.
yeah. Okay. That's really funny. I'm just like reflecting on my own life and my own mom, who is sisters with your mom.
Yeah, who have
I
the
was
same
born,
birthday.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I was born January 25th, and my mom has always taken the tree down on December 26th. So I wonder if it was a similar
It
reason. I
must be,
never like
yeah.
connected that in my brain.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
funny.
weird Straga thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
probably.
One of many. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I remember like before the holidays, I was like, oh, it's going to be like crunch time once the holidays are over. And I was like, I got everything cleaned up, and like the nursery and stuff were already done, which was like finished way later than with our first kid. And I was just like waiting and sitting and bouncing and stretching and like very ready. And I think the
Hmm.
hard part was like, we live now like up to 45 minutes away from the hospital. We were far at our old house when we had our first kid, but then we moved and then we were even farther.
Okay.
And so I was like, when we go to the hospital, it has to be very intentional. We need to make sure we're ready and all
Hmm.
that stuff. So I was like, I have to like, my mom has to drive up and take care of our toddler. And so there was just so many moving pieces. And I was like, if it happens in the middle of the night, all of that.
Right.
So it was just a lot. Like, and again, I think I was like, okay, get your mind right and this baby will come. Like if you're freaking out, like she's going to be like, not yet, mom, get it
Yeah,
together. And then I'll
exactly.
come.
Babies know. They know when it's a
Yeah,
calm
they
and
do.
and peaceful environment.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear kind of more about your decision to do a VBAC.
Oh, yes. I recovering from a cesarean was painful, obviously. It's just like another layer. It's just like I just remember like trying to sit up in my bed and grab my baby and nurse in the middle of the night, and like how hard that was. I feel like I was grateful. I had a really fast and easy recovery. So, obviously things could have been harder, but they were hard. And I didn't want to go through that again. And especially with a toddler, and then
Yeah.
especially in a house with stairs, because our other house didn't have any. So I was just like, it's going to be a lot more challenging.
Mhm.
And I think probably just in the back of my mind, I was like, I want to do it. I know I can. I want to do it. I want to push this baby out.
That's amazing. It
Yeah.
makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do any research or like childbirth classes around VBAC, or did you just like decide I'm going to do this and just did it?
So it's really interesting when you schedule to have a VBAC. I think I like signed something at the doctor's office, and they like handed me this paper. It was actually pretty terrifying. They handed me this piece of paper, and it was like all about the risks and like what
Mm.
could happen. And they literally had a chart, and it was like number of people that die in car accidents a year, number of people that die from this and this. And then it was like equating, they're like, see, it's not that bad. Like people die from car accidents, and sometimes people die from a VBAC. And I was like, I remember taking the paper home to my husband, and I was like, "What?" Like,
What in the world?
yeah.
Wow.
I wish I had a copy of it still, so I could explain it exactly. And I don't know if that's like just my hospital or if that's like a thing, but that was kind of scary. I was like, okay, well, cool. I guess we'll do it. I don't know.
And then it's interesting to me just because like to play the devil's advocate, they don't give
Mhm.
you that when you're about to have a cesarean. Like here are the risks for the
Yeah.
cesarean. They say, this is what we're doing, right? Here
Hmm.
are the benefits. You get a baby, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, just so that wow.
Yeah.
Interesting approach that I probably wouldn't
Hmm. I
condone
remember,
myself.
yeah, yeah. And I do remember my doctor, I want to say it was actually at my like 6-week checkup with my firstborn, like told me about VBAC delivery. I was like, whoa, lady, like, can
Well,
you give me
that's
my birth control? And like, just want to leave, you know? But yeah, she had talked, she was like, oh, there's this really great team of midwives, I think like at the hospital that specialize in VBAC. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I was like, but the epidural was kind of nice.
yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. That's awesome. I mean, I think I think it's great if we start the conversation really early and let people know that
Mm-hmm.
they have a choice. Because there was a whole thing for a long time, like once a cesarean, always a cesarean.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing people say. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Hmm. You're like, slow down.
Yeah.
I
I
need
was
to
like,
think
oh.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also was like convinced that I was going to have big babies forever, you know? So my first was 9-12 and my second was 6-14. So I
Hmm.
think that definitely helped with my success on the VBAC. She
Yeah.
slipped right out. But yeah, I was like, ooh, VBAC with a 10-pound baby. I don't know. But I mean, she was tracking to be small my whole pregnancy. So I think that helped alleviate a little bit of my anxiety.
Yeah. You totally could have done it with a 10-pound baby.
Yeah.
Promise you. You totally could have.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your second birth and how that transpired, like, and your feelings around it.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, it was a lot emotionally leading up to it. And then I was like, okay, no, get your head right. Let's do this. So
Mm-hmm.
I bounced. I was a big bouncer for both my pregnancies. I bounced. I found some, like labor meditation on YouTube. And I'm sure my husband walked downstairs and he just like walked back upstairs. He's like, girl, you're in your zone. Like, I'm
Not
just
messing with
gonna,
that.
yeah, I'm gonna slowly back away and go back upstairs. Yeah. So that helped. And it was weird. Like, you know, I had the app on my phone timing my contractions and like, I felt them. They were long enough. The timing was right. And then like they hurt. But you know, there's the whole thing of like, you shouldn't be able to carry on a conversation during your contractions. And like, there's all these things that it's like when it's time to go to the hospital. But again, we're like 45 minutes away. At this point, it was like 9 o'clock at night. And I was like, oh, this is not good timing. And so I was like, man, but my app keeps saying like, go to the hospital, go to the hospital, go to the hospital. So I was like, hey babe, I'm going to call my mom and I think we should go to the hospital. So we drive, luckily there was no traffic. It was like 11 o'clock or something. And in the car, my contractions stopped. And I actually don't know if I've ever told him this. So if you're listening, that's what happened. My contractions stopped on the car ride. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to be so mad. Like, obviously joking, but it's because they said like, it took a lot for us to leave, you know, I had to call my
Right.
mom up and wait. And
Right.
it was just a lot. So even we had always joked my whole pregnancy, like, if we're going to the hospital, you better be sure. And I was like, oh my gosh, they stopped. Well, luckily I had been walking around for like 3 weeks at 2.5, 3 centimeters dilated. So I was like, okay, I think it'll be okay. And we get to the hospital and we had to be like let in because it's like a lot of security at night.
Yeah.
He was so mad because there was no chair next to the entrance. And I was like, he was like, oh, you need a chair. You need to sit down. He's like, where's the security people? And I was like, calm down. Like, it's okay. I'm fine. Like,
I can walk in.
I can walk. And I was like so nervous the whole time. So when they finally got me back and checked me, they're like, okay, you're staying, you're having a baby. I was like, whoo, thank goodness. That's over. Don't have to have that awkward conversation. But it was like weirdly the most like relaxing labor ever. And it ended up like, again, it's like all the details are fuzzy, but it was like kind of fast and then it slowed down for a while. But like I was chilling. I took a nap and I was having these contractions and I was like, okay, I know I want an epidural, especially for pushing, like if I'm going to do this VBAC. But I was like, you know, they're kind of good now. I'm like, we're fine. Because I think the anesthesiologist had to go into a cesarean or something. So I was like, when he comes back, it's fine. No rush. And it was good. it really helped with the contractions. It did not block my vagina, so that was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it helped with the contractions, and she came out. I think I pushed for like an hour or an hour and a half. So
That's such a redemptive
yeah,
story
yeah.
from the last. Yeah,
And it
man.
really is this like crazy, like when they finally come out, you're just like, what? This is crazy. And then I just, yeah, like pulling her up onto my chest. I think I was like, this is it. This is the mom moment that I
Hmm.
miss with my first, which is hard because, you know, now you don't want to be like, I had that with you. I don't have that with you.
Right.
So it's like,
Right.
oh, I have two girls who are 2 years apart. And it's like, you know, I feel like it's going to be a long road of balancing these relationships. And I never want that to play into it. But
Yeah. Yeah. Something
yeah.
to think about and process. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really like mindful and like self-aware of you to even recognize that, because I don't hear that from a lot of people who have had opposing birth
Mm-hmm.
stories or like polar opposite birth stories. So just being aware of it is probably the best thing that you can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that you have two babies,
Definitely.
what after that second birth experience, what were those first few months postpartum like? And you can compare
Okay.
it to the last, or yeah, I'm just curious on that.
They were great. I think I definitely have the best postpartum husband I could ask for.
Oh,
I mean, he was like cooking me scallops and like best chef. And I was like, give me all the hot food, give me this bone broth. You know, I was like,
I
give me
love
all
it.
these things. With my first pregnancy, I made all of these like freezer meals. My mom and I worked all day one weekend. We made all these freezer meals, and I didn't use like any of them because he cooked for me. And
He
not
was
that I,
cooking.
yeah, like it's not that I like didn't expect that he would, but I was like, this is what the internet tells you you're supposed to do, you know, and you just
Mhm.
never know like how it's going to be. And I mean,
Yeah.
you know, what if breastfeeding wasn't working and I was pumping and he was bottle feeding, you know, so there's just like so many things that can go into it. But I just feel like immediately postpartum, I mean, I was obviously like emotional and it was really hard, and there were a lot of those moments, but I was like, I always felt I was like, okay, this is okay. I can do this.
Mm.
So another layer of it all is my husband is a big waterfowl hunter, and the season of that is mid-October to the last weekend of January. So he will always give me a hard time because I did my um, conception math, you know, not correctly. So both of our children were born, yes, during that season. And I mean, it was even to the point where like I felt comfortable when they were 2, 3 weeks old, and he might not be happy I'm sharing this, but it's like, I was like, no, like you can go out for the day. I've got this. I'm good. And I think that like, you know, maybe for other people, they don't understand there, and they're like, how could he be out hunting and all this stuff. But again, it kind of goes back to like when I was talking about my first birth, is like, yes, everyone should be focusing on mom. It's not always just about baby, you know, baby showers, they should be a mom shower, right? Isn't that what you always say,
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
yes, it's about baby, yes, it's about mom, but it's also about, you know, whoever is helping out with that. And like he also went through a lot too, and like no one really ever talks about the mental capacity and the emotions for the dad also. And so it's like,
Mhm.
you know, not only like, yeah, I'm dealing with myself and the baby, but he's dealing with me as the mom, the baby, and then also himself. And so it's like,
Mhm.
if I can give him, not give him, but it's like if he can get that time, you know, to take an afternoon and go do what he loves, get some fresh air, then I think that's going to help him be a stronger, you know, parenting partner and
Hmm.
postpartum partner. So
That's a
that's a
really,
little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to put that out there
no,
because
I love that.
I think some people don't understand. But again, it's like, you know, 2, 3 weeks postpartum, I was like, okay, I got this. I could stay home. And he was able to take off a decent amount of time from work for both of our births, which was really cool. And I felt confident when he left the house. And I think that's like the greatest thing that you can ask for. And again, it was
Yeah.
hard. I'm not saying I had it easy and I knew what I was doing. Like I was crying and like freaking out, but but enough where I was like, okay, we can do this. And
You were
with our,
empowered. You
yeah,
were
I was,
empowered.
yes, I was. And with our second born, like, I mean, she's incredible. And I think for the people that know her, it's like, you know, she's just like a very caring, nurturing kind of crazy little person. And I am, you know, like luckily, so she was just over 2 years old. She could communicate enough. She could follow directions well enough. She could fetch me my water bottle when I was nursing, like huge pro tip. But she was just like head over heels, you know, it's like she loves
Mhm.
being a big sister. And I mean, even to this day, we've never really struggled with like those big jealousy moments. And I think that was really reassuring for me. And I think it's like, she's like my little partner too sometimes, you know?
Mhm.
And so when I'm, you know, if I'm home alone all day with the baby, definitely helps if you have a dog. I think that's pretty helpful. But if you have a dog and a toddler, it's like you have like your own little pack, and it just makes it a little bit easier to get through a day.
Mhm. Okay, so when you were expecting your second, did you do any preparation with your first? Like, did you do any um, books or education or trying to encourage her to think about having a new sibling?
Yeah, it's definitely weird because, again, like by the time our second was born, our toddler could communicate, but like leading up to that, you know, a couple months can make a big difference.
Oh
And,
yeah,
you know, obviously like the physical belly can help, but like I said, we
right.
were the first in our family to have a kid, and then therefore a second kid. And we have a couple friends who have kids around their age, but it was just all so new. And so she didn't really have many things to look at and be like, oh yeah, like that person. Um, so yeah, we had a couple books, and you know, I read a couple books about how to help them, but I think it was just kind of natural for her. I don't know.
I love that. She's an amazing little
Mm,
kid.
she is.
I always enjoy it when we're on FaceTime and she has something to tell me.
Yes, and she drew you a picture today.
Oh, she did.
Yeah,
Aw.
potatoes.
Oh, potatoes. I love potatoes.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so I kind of want to know if you were to, this is like a self-reflective question.
Hmm.
If you were to go back and talk to yourself when you were pregnant the first time, knowing what you now know,
Hmm.
what advice would you give yourself? What would you say?
Oh, I would probably say you're doing it right. I don't know, like trust yourself,
Hmm.
and yeah, just do what you think is best, because no, you know, everyone has an answer for everything, and someone's always going to be wrong about something. So just choose what you believe and be right about
That makes me very happy to hear you say that. And because, well,
it.
one, it shows that you really listen to your instincts
Hmm.
and rely on those, but also
Hmm.
because that's basically the theme of this entire podcast. I know you've listened to
Yeah,
other
I know.
episodes. Like
Yeah,
everybody says
everyone
that.
says
And
that.
yeah, so it makes me happy every
Yeah,
time a new guest kind of echoes
yeah.
that
I think
message.
there's also another layer to that too, which I don't want it to sound negative, but it's also, yes, that, but also it's okay to be wrong,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
And it's so, and again, not that there's like everything is black and white, because it's not, but it's okay to change your mind. And it's
Yes.
okay
Yes.
to change your beliefs and your opinions about things. And again, like if you have a birth one way and then you have another one and you want it to do it completely differently, that doesn't change anything about your first birth. And it doesn't change anything about that kid or that delivery. And it doesn't make the other one any better or less, you know? And
Hmm.
it's, and, you know, just whatever you're believing about and the way that you make choices. Cause you know, I've gone through different ways that I make choices for our health and our family. And I think it's really easy for me to like beat myself up and be like, why did I do that? That was dumb. Like, that's wrong. But at the time, I thought it was right. And that's
Hmm.
okay. But now I know better.
Yeah. And we only can do with what we know at the
Mm-hmm.
time, right? We do as well as we can. I really think you can tell me what you think about this. Social media makes it challenging for us to change our minds.
Yeah.
In that, if we post something like, oh, I did this today with this child in
Mm-hmm.
this way, or I'm eating this particular food, then it's out there for everyone to see. It's
Mm-hmm.
public,
Yeah.
right? And then we decide, oh, actually, I don't eat that anymore, or I'm changing how I think about this concept. And so it's almost a barrier to change our minds because we've already stated that. Does
Yeah,
that make any
that
sense?
makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I've ever really like processed that wholly, and that makes so much sense.
Yeah, because we're afraid of what people will
Yeah.
think of us changing our mind. Like, oh, you like, who's going to do this? But our internal critic is like, oh, your friend on Instagram is going to come at you and say, who are you to
Hmm.
say that you believe this now? Because
Yeah.
you've said something quite different before.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, thank you for saying it's okay
Mhm.
to be wrong and it's okay to, or have a different opinion about something because you read a new piece of
Yes.
evidence, right? The world
Yes.
is ever changing. Science
Hmm.
is ever changing.
Yeah.
So, um, okay, so as we're talking about that, you've kind of been on this journey of nutrition and the pro metabolic life. We've been
Hmm.
talking a lot about that, you and
Yeah.
I. Minimal shoes, all of that. What has been your favorite swap, kind of towards a more natural lifestyle that you've kind of
Ooh.
done the last few years?
Well, I feel like I can't not talk about sourdough, right?
Oh, good.
And I have you to thank a lot of that for. I'm actually making a fresh batch today.
Oh, lovely. Me
It's
too.
been a journey. I tried well over a year ago, and it was just I was eating it and I was like, I don't think this is right, but I just kept doing it. And then once our youngest was born, I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And then we were talking about it, and you were like, wait, you made your own starter from scratch? That's crazy. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I did it right. And then you mailed me some, which was like the funniest thing ever, and I loved it. And now it works. And now I'm giving some to my sister, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
she asked me for some. Um, that's really fun. And like this morning, um, I activated my starter, and I have this like giant tub I put it in, and our toddler comes up. Ooh, can I help you stir? Because like that's her thing. She loves stirring. She gets her little stool out. She was like, "What are you making?" I was like, "I'm making bread." She's like, "Ooh, I want to help you." I was like, "Okay, well we have to do our starter first." And she's like, "Okay, now can we make the bread?" I'm like, "No, we have to wait until it's all bubbly." And so I always tell it, we put the towel on, it has to take a nap.
Oh my
And
gosh, that's so sweet.
is it time? Is it time to make bread yet? I'm like, well, no, we have to wait. We'll do it after dinner. I have my timeline perfect now.
Yeah.
Okay, are we gonna make dinner? I was like, no, it's breakfast time. No. So it's like really cool to be able to like bring her into something like that. She loves helping me like cook and clean. She's very domestic, but um, and just like I'm like, oh, this is math. Like she loves doing the measuring spoons and everything, and um, and then just the patience of it all, and then
Mm.
reaping the benefits afterwards.
Yeah. It's a really good life skill to have, but
Hmm.
it's like the slow living, right? You have to slow down to do sourdough. It's not instant.
Hmm.
And it has taught me a lot about like good things take time and you can't rush the process. I tried to rush last night. I made sourdough naan and I did it spur of the moment, and they didn't taste as good as they
Oh,
do when I give it, a day to process. So,
yeah,
um, yeah. Um, yay. I'm glad you're sharing the sourdough starter too.
yeah. And one other thing related to that is bone broth. And I have this like crazy chicken routine down, which I'm going to share on Instagram sometime.
Okay.
But it's like my husband smokes the whole chickens, and I make the broth. Like he preps it for me in the freezer. Like it's this whole like family meal prep thing. And I'm now putting the broth in these like silicone milk storage bags that you can freeze. It's like
Oh,
I'm like
nice.
I'm reusing things. But it's like it's this whole thing. I'm gonna make a video sometime, so
Okay.
I'll share that in the
I'm
future. But
excited
yeah.
for that. So you mentioned your second baby was 20th percentile
Mhm.
and your first was 90th. How has that played out in the first year? Wait, how old
Yeah,
is
she's a
she?
year.
I second guessed my timelines
Yeah.
for a second. How has that played out in her first year of life?
Yeah, so she, like I said, she was born exactly as she was tracked out to be, 20th percentile. And that was just like baffling to me. I just, like I said, I never thought I would have a tiny baby. Um, my husband and I were both like 8.5 pounds exactly at birth. And so I was like, okay, we'll have, 8 to 10 pound babies. That's just math and genetics and everything, right?
Yeah.
Um, so she was 20 percentile at birth. Just felt so tiny, just like it was weird looking back to have an almost 10-pound baby. I was like, she's like a 2-month-old. So it just felt like
Yeah.
a lot more fragile and everything. And she was nursing fine. Everything was working. And then at her, I can't remember if it was her 2-month or her 3-month checkup, her weight started going down. And then it was getting down to like third percentile. And at one appointment, the doctor was kind of like, oh, yeah, her weight's kind of going down. And it wasn't like a huge thing. But then it was at the next, and then it was at the next appointment where then it was like first percentile. And I was like, oh. And that appointment that I had brought her in for, she had like, some interesting diaper situation happening and a rash. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of weird. Like, that seems like a food thing maybe. And at that point, so I had already cut out gluten and dairy for myself and our toddler, hoping that it would help with our toddler's eczema. And then just our baby's stomach stuff. So I walk into this appointment and he checks her weight. He's like, you need to stop nursing and I'm sending you home with some formula. Keep pumping, but you can't breastfeed anymore right now. And I was like, what?
What?
Like, devastated.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh.
I was like, he was like, it's probably like a dairy allergy or something. But then I was like, well, that doesn't really make any sense because I had already cut out dairy. He was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this looks like an allergy to me. Here's a referral for an allergist. And so I go home and I just remember like, I can't remember if I had texted my husband or, yeah, I think I did. I texted him and I was like, I had to stop nursing. And like, we lived like 5 minutes from the doctor and I pulled the van into the garage and he was like waiting in the garage for me. And I just like opened the door and I was just like, he's just like, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine. He's like, he's a very reassuring person. And
That's good.
yeah. And it was really, really hard emotionally. And I mean, breastfeeding is just a very emotional journey. And I feel like to have it like ripped away from you is hard. Cause then I was like, what if she never nurses again and all this stuff. So I was continuing to pump. And then we ended up going to this allergist and he was like, yeah, a very small amount of food really passes through. I don't think it's an allergy, but you still need to have her on a hypoallergenic non-dairy formula or
Weird.
non-cow's, whatever. And
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, what? That's kind of weird. And I started reading the ingredients in these formulas that they were giving me and it's not good. I mean, like, I think as with a lot of things, like the US is a little behind on standards for things like that. But I was just like, I don't want to give my baby this stuff. Like, why am I giving her corn syrup?
Yeah.
What?
So did you actually listen to what he said and stop nursing
did.
and give her formula? Okay.
I did.
Okay.
And I continued that after we saw the allergist. So she was exclusively formula fed and I was pumping for a solid 3 weeks. And it was a lot. She was chugging it. And we were like, sweet, maybe she's hungry. There must be something wrong with my milk. Maybe it's not an allergy. It must be production. Or I must not have fatty enough milk or, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we keep going along, I keep having weight checks and all this stuff. Still not gaining exponentially. Okay, keep doing what you're doing. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why? I was like, she's drinking 48 ounces of formula a day as a 4-month-old and she's not gaining weight. Like, what is happening? So I was like, all right, my mom light is still red and I don't feel good about this. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, lactation consultant, here we go. So I met and I did like a weight check with a feeding. So they weigh your baby before you nurse, they weigh after so you can see exactly how much they consume, which is nice because like when I do these weight checks with a pediatrician, it's like if I had a 9 a.m. appointment one day and a 4 p.m. appointment the next time, like there's just,
It's inconsistent.
it's inconsistent. So you literally know at least how much they're intaking at the breast. She drank 8 ounces, nursed for the first time in 3 weeks. And then she drank like 3 ounces of formula after that. And like the lactation consultant and I were just like, what is happening? Like, they were like, she was like, okay, it's not an issue. And she was also like, you had your first birth was a 10-pound baby and you nursed her for over 10 months. Like, there's nothing wrong with your milk. And so like, that was really reassuring to me. And it's hard but then it's like, okay, I have these 3 healthcare professionals who all kind of have a different opinion. And I know who I want to believe. I want to believe the lactation consultant who says that I can nurse her full time and I don't need to be giving her formula. And that there's nothing wrong with what we're doing. But it's like in the back of my mind, why are these other people saying these other things?
Right.
So I pushed the pediatrician and the allergist with this information. I'd like had all the spreadsheets and the charts and here's the weight gain. Here's what we do. I was like, okay, this is what it is like to advocate for yourself or for someone else. It's like, yes, this is what you're saying, but this is the information I'm bringing to you. What do you have to say about it? And that was hard to like, it's hard to find the courage to like challenge somebody who you're essentially like paying to give you advice and who has a lot of, schooling and experience and everything. But it's like, but how? But I don't get it. So fast forward, she started eating solid foods, and around at her 9-month checkup, she jumped up to the 7th percentile from like off the charts negative percentile.
Wow.
So that was huge. I think I still was like, okay, we're getting there. Food's working. Let's do that. And then I was still kind of doing a mix of like formula, express breast. Oh, and then I was after I saw the lactation consultant, I was bottle feeding her expressed breast milk with formula added to it to like make it.
Wow.
Yeah. So like typical formula in breast milk is 22 calories per ounce. And so I was bumping it up to like, I think that's what it is, to like 24, 26 or again, it's only a couple months ago and I don't remember all the details, but
that's okay. That's okay.
But yeah. And then, so we just had her 12-month checkup. She's still at the 7th percentile, which I was kind of shocked because she eats a lot. And I was like, well, if she started gaining when she was eating the first, then, 3 months in, like she must be like 15th percentile.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is kind of hard of like when to know when to be satisfied. And I feel like as a parent, you're never really satisfied. But I think my husband always reminds me, she's happy, she's sleeping, she's, developmentally good. Like she's good.
Yeah.
And then also it's like, we can still ask questions later down the road. Yeah. So we don't have to like be satisfied or dissatisfied now and stuck with it. So
it's a good reminder in all things health.
Yeah, right.
I love how your theme through all of that, like the common thread was you acknowledging that something felt off and you listened to that and you pursued more opinions of healthcare professionals and then you challenged them. That makes me so proud of you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah, thanks. I love that you brought like physical charts and presented that to your provider too. Because I think, like you said, that's really challenging as a parent. And even if it's your second kid, third kid, whatever, like it's challenging to speak up for yourself and listen to your body and then also speak up for another little human, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that will be very encouraging to a lot of people listening.
Good.
So,
good.
Okay. So I want to know your favorite resources. If you were talking to friends, if you're encouraging new moms, someone who's pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
what do you recommend they read, watch, follow, all of that?
It's a loaded question. It's a good one. I mean, obviously, you. You're my
Oh,
favorite
thank you.
person. I'm not just saying that, but you are one of my favorite people to suggest and refer. Um,
I appreciate that.
I and I know we've had this conversation before, but there was a point um, when our youngest was about 6 months old that I had to take a break from a lot of social media. I think it was doing more harm than good because I can tend to get a little obsessive with information. And I had seen that kind of with our health journey. And so I had to like unfollow a lot of people because I was just bombarded. I remember seeing something, it was about like paste bottle feeding or something. And I was like, that wasn't even on my radar. I don't even know what that is. And now I have to be worried about how I'm giving my baby a bottle. Like, I thought you weren't supposed to have any air in it. And, it's just like all this stuff. So it's like you think you're just mindlessly scrolling, but you're like constantly bombarded with this information and then
Yeah.
making yourself second guess. So I'm kind of
Mm.
opposite answering your question. And I
Yeah.
can, like, I'm happy to share some resources if you want to add them in the notes. But I think that sometimes you are your best resource and it's your baby and you know them the best. There's a lot of really good information out there, but it's really hard to process it all. And it's really hard to know
Mm.
what's right for you and your family and your baby. I think, again, that social media is very fast. And because there is so much to process, I prefer podcasts and YouTube. And of course, anyone can have a podcast, anyone can have YouTube. So you need to be
Right.
careful of, and screen it for what you're listening to. But I think it's a lot more intentional when you're like absorbing the information and you have more time to process it than what did someone share in a 10-second reel,
Yes. Yeah.
here's a 15-minute
Agreed.
video or an hour-long podcast. And there's usually a lot more like links and details. And so I think that it's easier to not take something the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like your opposite answer.
Right. I feel like that's not the first time I did that to you.
That's okay. That's okay. And I think social media too, like those quick reels are attention grabbing. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times people do things for shock value rather than for educational content,
Yeah.
which is just, it's problematic in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. But okay, so we haven't talked about your businesses yet.
Yeah.
What's it like being a mom and a business owner of two small businesses?
It's a lot. And it's something that I think about every single day if it's the right choice. I've had my moments crying on the kitchen floor, ready to quit. I remember I had this conversation with my husband once. I was like, I just want peace. I want to be able to wake up and have peace and, walk through my garden or, just like something boring like that. Not that
That's not boring.
I know,
Gardens
right?
are exciting.
Sorry. Just,
That's okay.
it's like sometimes I think I crave this like very slow lifestyle that's easy, but I don't think that that's me because I'd be doing that if it was, right? But instead, I'm always looking for more and trying new things. I am 2.5 years into my first business, which is baby and children's clothing and accessories. So I'm hand sewing things. Most of the things that I do are made to order, which is a little bit exhausting. So I'm starting to move in more of a ready to ship and in-person shopping experience, which is a really big goal of mine. And it's very exciting. I have some stuff in the local shop in Snohomish, and I would love to do some like farmers markets this year, and just have things ready. Like it's like my dream to like walk into my office and grab something and putting it in a bag and put it in the mail. Like that feels like very rewarding to me.
Yes. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've realized, particularly this week, as I'm approaching like a really busy season, is we're always like encouraged like have some me time and take some time off and do all these things. So I'm like, I don't sit on the couch and read a book and drink coffee during my kids nap time. Like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I do this? I'm like, well, it's because my kids only overlap their naps for 45 minutes to an hour right now in their phase of life. And I have a lot of things that I would love to get done. And I had this realization this week that I was like, why can't my businesses be my me time? It's that saying of like, do something you love and you every day and you won't work a day in your life or something like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I get it. It makes sense. Like, my husband built me this beautiful office and I love waking up and coming in here every day. And it's finally like inspiring and motivating. And it feels like clean and just like ready for me. And so I think it's a lot easier for me to like pop in and work on things in little bits throughout the day. I think it's also really important to realize like what is the most important thing for you in each aspect of your life. So when it comes to like cleaning your home or cooking or organizing, like what really matters to you, put your time and your energy into that. And if something doesn't matter, then don't. Like if you don't really care if your blinds and your baseboards are dusty right now in your season of life, then don't focus your time on them. Like, I listened to this audiobook called The Lazy Genius, and that's what the theme of it is. It's like, don't do the things that you don't care about. Like if someone on Instagram is telling you that you should be doing that, don't do it if you don't care. And I think that that's really helped. And like finding ways that I can either like do chores or do business activities while my kids are awake and without taking away from them. I don't want to be sitting on my computer in front of them all day. So, how can I like, I figured that instead of waking up earlier and showering before they wake up, I can, safely corral them in my bathroom. I have a glass shower door and I can literally like wash my shower while I'm taking a shower and washing my hair. And I just like spray water on the door while they're standing out there and they think it's the most entertaining thing in the world. Like, and so I'm like, perfect. Now I don't have to scrub my shower while they're napping. And
you don't have to wake up earlier
I
to
know,
shower ahead of
right?
time.
Yeah. I'm like, can I start going on walks to the park instead of, doing a workout in my living room that I don't necessarily want to be doing, or
Yeah,
I was doing like,
totally.
you'd be proud. I was playing Magnetiles today, doing like core breath work on the floor. And I was like,
I
so it's
love
like,
it.
you have to multitask. And I think
Yeah.
multitasking gets a bad rap a lot, but it's like, it can be done correctly.
I think how Katie Bowman puts it, like stacking your life, putting your habits together that work together really well, that are more efficient. It sounds better than multitasking.
Yes.
And it's more productive than multitasking,
Yes.
like doing a bunch of things at one time. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, wise words. Okay, so where can people find your businesses? What do you offer? Talk all about that.
Okay. So you can find me on Instagram and on Etsy for both of them. So the first one is called Sweet Babe Clothing. So that's the handle. And then you can find it at sweetbabeclothing.etsy.com. And that's all the kids' clothes. So I have like baby gift sets and clothing for kids up to age like 6 or 10, depending on what they are. And then the other one is called Revelry Handcrafted. And the handle for Instagram is revelry.handcrafted. And that's party stuff. So not only do I take care of children and sew, but I really, really like cake. And I love making cake. And I love making people feel special. And like birthdays are a big thing for me. And they're not for other people. So I love to force them upon other people. And I just love decorating things. And I think, in the world of Amazons and Targets and Walmarts and, we fill our homes with cheap things, and not that that's bad. If that's your thing, cool. But it's like, how can we stand out now when we're full of items, like I think handmade and handcrafted things are the way to do that. And they just, make life a little bit better.
I agree. And speaking as a recipient of some of your cake
Yeah.
creations,
Yeah.
you do a very good job at all
Thank
of
you.
that. So,
Thanks.
yeah. Have you made a sourdough cake yet?
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
It
You
is?
can make everything
Oh,
with
yes.
sourdough.
Okay.
Yes. You have to tell me what you
It's on
try.
my list.
um, Okay, let's wrap up with the 2 questions that I like to ask
Okay.
everybody. So first one, what is your number 1 piece of advice for our listeners? What do you want everyone to know?
Okay. Can I give you like a 3-level advice thing?
Yes,
Okay.
you can. I should probably change this question because most people can't just narrow it down to 1.
Okay. This is my 3 pieces of advice for new parents.
Okay.
First one, if there's a funny, a practical, and a serious.
Okay.
Practical one would be, you need to have a water bottle in every single room where you might be nursing or feeding your child. And because then maybe the people in your home will be tired of you asking for water bottles all of the time. So fill them up the night before, stash them throughout your house. My practical piece of advice, if you're planning on having more than one child, just buy multiple baby monitors that have a split screen because then you won't have to walk around your house with multiple monitors and you'll just have one ready to go. And
Smart.
Yeah. And then my third piece is basically what we've been talking about this whole time is, trusting yourself and go with your gut, and you're going to figure it out, and you might be wrong and you might be right and you might change your mind, and that's okay.
Amen to all of that. Okay, second question. What is your favorite daily wellness habit that you are incorporated into your life right now? Doesn't have to be a long-term thing.
The one that I'm trying to do is to get outside and get sunlight. I was very inspired by your podcast episode that talked about that, particularly about getting kids outside.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought it was going to be more challenging, but I feel like our toddler is the one that's begging to go outside today. She's like, can we go ride my bike? And I was like, okay, open the front door and take a look outside. There's 3 inches of snow on the sidewalk right now. She's like, okay, I can't ride my bike. Maybe tomorrow. So I would love to get into a better habit of, going on walks and going outside. I'm really excited because I just spoiled my early birthday surprise from my brother, but he got me this really nice, fancy, one of those like daylight happy lights.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he has like a top of the line one at his house, and we were just visiting him, and he turns it on every morning, and I would sit on the couch with my coffee, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And so he was like, I got you one. And then I'm so excited. Yeah, so excited about it. So sunlight, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Even worse for you. I feel like I can't complain.
No, you can. It's dark there.
Yeah.
I have realized that since putting up a light for filming and doing podcasts, if I do morning podcasts, I feel so much better throughout the day. So it's kind of like it's a makeshift happy light. It's essentially that, right? It's a big filming light. So it's been a discovery of mine. I've lived here my entire life and never owned a happy light. Julianne, thank you so much for being here and deciding to share your story and encourage and empower other parents. I'm really excited for this one to air.
Thank you, Natalie. It felt really good and strange and wonderful to talk about myself and my children for that long, but I think it's really important, and I really appreciate it. I was honestly when you first suggested I come on, I was like, why would people want to listen to me? I'm not an expert, I didn't write a book or anything. They're like, well, you're a mom. And I was like, yeah, I actually have to remind myself that sometimes. And now I have 2 kids, but yes, I am a mom.
My top takeaways from my conversation with Julianne is that motherhood is a whole journey in and of itself, and leaning into your mom gut and intuition is the best thing you can do for yourself and your family. I also love how she brought up dad's mental health as well during that early postpartum time, as that's not something we hear often or talk about as much. If you would like to order either kids' clothes or party decorations, you can use my code Natalie10 for a discount on your order. This code will work on both the Sweet Babe clothing as well as the Revelry Handcrafted Etsy stores. I'll be sure to put the code in the show notes as well as Julianne's site and all of her social pages for you to follow. Please remember that what you hear on this podcast is not medical advice, but remember to always do your own research and talk to your healthcare team before making important decisions about your wellness. If you found this podcast helpful, please consider writing a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you next time.